Right, so this is essentially round 2. There is a more adult version, so we say, of this video on certain Discords if you want to watch that. But this is essentially how Ravenous really works, because there is a lot of bad, wrong, incorrect, made up, terrible information about this weapon. What's surprising is all this information has actually come from larger content creators that clearly don't know, and we'll just leave that like that. So Ravenous, what exactly is it? Well, to start off with, it is a raid exclusive. We get this from the Iron Horse raid, and it is potentially one of, if not the most powerful weapon individually, simply because of the way it works and the fact that it can buff itself with both additive and multiplicative damage, as well as transfer that damage to other things, such as using the Dodge City holster with a pistol with its buffs, as long as you shoot the correct part. Without those buffs, it is actually one of the highest DPS rifles, like just at base value, which is pretty damn impressive. It's got a pretty damn decent fire rate. Essentially it's a 30 round magazine, although it says 60, but you fire 2 shots with 1 trigger pull. This is actually where a lot of the DPS comes from. It is very, very accurate and stable, although this is kind of a misleading statement, because when aiming you have 2 reticules, which you might notice. While in cover, this will be put to 1 reticule, which does help you out, but when doing rapid fire you might notice that you actually kind of miss one, or sometimes even both the barrel at longer ranges. To use in open world, it is very much a close quarter weapon due to the way how the reticules work, which you can see as I'm running around here. Then there are certain ways in which you can bolster its damage, which we will be going over. Now, from the offset, I'm going to state here, and I'll go into it a bit later, this weapon does not work against armor the way most people think it does. Can it do armor damage? Yes. Can you put contractor's gloves with it and do armor damage that way? Yes. But then that's the same as any weapon. What a lot of people seem to think is that bonus amplified damage to armor plating means is enemy armor. No. And we'll leave that there for now, because I will demonstrate this a bit later on in the video. Now, just because I know you all love them so much, this is a DPS graph of the Ravenous versus the M1A. Ravenous is the yellow, the M1A is the blue. As you can see, the M1A has a higher DPS climb, but the Ravenous does creep ahead simply due to the size of the magazine. That's basically where all of its DPS actually comes from. Now, there is another hidden feature on this which the DPS graph will not show, and that is the talent. Gary and Freaky. When fired from the right shoulder, it has an offensive primer. When fired from the left shoulder, it fires a defensive primer. Hits from the opposite shoulder will detonate the offensive and defensive primers respectively. When detonated, each offensive primer deals 100% weapon damage. The defensive primers give 4% bonus armor and 10% amplified damage to armor plating. The primer effectiveness is doubled at 10 stacks. Because you are firing 2 shots with every trigger pull, you essentially need to do 5 shots initially, and then as you swap, you will detonate that. With the offensive primers, this will be, in essence, about 2000% weapon damage. You do 100 weapon damage with 1 offensive primer. So if you get 10, although that would initially be 1000, but because it's doubled, or the primer effectiveness is doubled at 10 stacks, that's 2000% weapon damage, which, as you start equating that in, does actually perform more than the classic M1A. The only issue is the weapon in open world with the whole shoulder switching thing can get a bit clunky, especially when in cover. Now, I've just spoken about the primers. There is another thing we need to talk about here. when you start your initial shoulder swapping combo, when firing from the right shoulder, you fire your 5 shots. When you swap to the left and you fire 2 bullets, one of those bullets will act as a detonator and not as a primer. So you'll only get 1 stack after you have swapped shoulders to detonate either your offensive or defensive primers. Which, if you do the math, means that you will get to 9 stacks. So you will need to do another shot. So you do 5 from one shoulder, and then when you swap, you'll need to do 6 shots, not 5. This is a really weird common misconception that you can just go 5, swap, 5, swap, 5. If you want it to be the most effective, you do 5, and then from then on, it's 6, 6, 6, 6. And I'm hoping that solves up that issue there. Another issue I have seen is a lot of people seem to claim that explosive damage will help buff the primer's explosion damage. No, it doesn't. Outright. Doesn't actually do anything. The primer explosions are actually pretty simple, really, although also misleading because obviously it's an explosion. They are only affected by weapon damage, rifle damage, and then your crit. Now, the way the crit works on the Ravenous seems complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. The game just does a simple crit yes-no scenario. There are 11 scenarios, 0 being none of those explosions crit, because it's not 1 explosion, there's 10, but it just gives you 1 damage number. And if 1 explosion crits, obviously then that would be a different number, 2 explosions, different amount of damage, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. This is why a lot of people have reported that the explosion damage from Ravenous seems to give varying and inconsistent damage. Yes and no, it will be consistent within those 11 variables, but every single one of those 11 variables will be different. So for those people that have said or believe that you don't need to build crit into Ravenous, you absolutely do, because the higher your crit rate, the higher those explosions will be, and the higher those explosions will be, guess how much more damage you will do. And then if you've got your amplified armor plating damage and then you're hitting the correct targets, you can hit up to, I have had reported to me that people have been doing about 800 million damage. Admittedly, this is an raid with a bunch of varying other buffs and bonuses going on, but yeah, that is just how much you can hit with this weapon. So yeah, next time you hear someone say that you don't need to build crit with Ravenous, point, laugh, and then move on. Trust me, you want your crit. 50 seems to be about a good medium. If not, go for the full 60. Damage to targets out of cover, probably the most OP stat in the game. Guess what? Also does not affect the explosion damage. Yeah, when I said the only thing that affects the explosion damage is your weapon damage, your rifle damage, and your crit, I really meant it. There is one other variable that if you have your amplified bonus damage on and you have or are hitting the correct targets, if you have any damage to health, that is also applied. Okay, this weapon doesn't actually scale that well with damage to armor, it scales with damage to health because of how the mechanic on the talent works. Okay, we'll get into this more, I promise. Right, for the next complaint that I have seen people use is that the swapping shoulders is a really annoying, clunky, like to get any bonuses you just have to keep swapping shoulder. Yes, I get it. However, the most useful thing that this weapon does is armor plating damage, and you don't actually need to swap shoulders to get your bonuses to armor plating. The circumstances and situations that you would use this trick in are probably niche and few and far between, but there are other ways of getting your bonuses, and that is quite simply killing the target, as you just possibly just saw me do there. It only works with defensive primers, but if you're looking over your left shoulder and operating off defensive primers, you don't need to swap shoulders to activate the bonus. If you just kill them with defensive primers on, you will get the bonus. For obvious reasons, this won't work on the right shoulder, simply because if you've killed them, there's no point in them exploding. They're dead. Maybe there could be a mechanic put in of where they transfer to another target and then explode, but then that would just be ridiculously overpowered, because you can essentially just keep stacking them. And yeah, you don't need to swap shoulders. You can just keep shooting from the left shoulder, annoyingly, but it's an option for those that don't want to swap shoulders. You can just keep stacking it on the left and laugh as you kill everything with overpowered over armor, because yeah. Anyway, right, probably the most important one: damage to armor. This is about as effective as it is on any other weapon with Ravenous, simply because obviously damage to armor is a stat in the game that we can utilize. However, it is not what people think it is, because on the Ravenous it clearly states armor plating. Yes, there is a difference between armor and armor plating. A lot of people trying to say armor plates. No, they're entirely different and separate things. Armor plating is found on the chungers or heavies, whatever you want to call them, the doggos, certain raid bosses, and the True Sons gunners. When they lay down, you might notice that if you hit them in the helmet, they don't actually take any damage until you destroy the helmet. While you are destroying this helmet, you might notice there's a weird shield flashing, and trust me, I'm not making this up. You can look here, see, it says armor plating. Okay, the Gary and Freaky talent, we've gone over it, we know what it does, but it quite clearly says there armor plating. Okay, not armor plating. And as I was saying, chungers have 6 sets. They've got a big helmet, they've got 2 massive shoulder pads and arms, their legs, and then their body itself, both front and back, is 6 pieces of armor plating. Doggos have 3. They've got 1 on the front with that light, and they've got 1 either side. The gunners from True Sons have 1, their helmet. Now you can see that the amount of damage that I'm doing with this build, the moment I detonate them and get my armor plating bonus, look, my damage hasn't changed. I'm getting no extra bonuses to damage to armor. This is very, very simple and easy to show. However, on the flip side to this, what we can do and show is the damage to actual armor plating. Okay, so like I said, it works against chungers, and lucky for us, here is a chunga. There is our armor plating bonus. Look how much damage it does. It's like I'm hitting about 2 mil. Okay, like chungers, that's what it's for. Just in case you didn't get enough and it wasn't close enough, let's zoom in. Look, the moment I get that armor plating bonus, I go to 2.4 mil. And then due to the fact that, I don't know why, but it went back down to about 1 point something odd mil. Okay, it's armor plating, chungers, doggos, certain raid bosses like Razorback. It's basically denoted by a shield in their health bar. Okay, the gunners as well. So when you see people doing crazy speedrun strats and just stacking Ravenous and then shooting with a pistol, okay, they're shooting a very specific location. Certain weak points as well do have armor plating. To damage armor plating as well, it is affected by health damage, not armor damage, health. To accomplish this, as well as what I'm actually running on this build here, is 3 Peace Walker Harris and the named Yarmask Hollow Man. Hollow Man has like 10% damage to health, and the 3 Peace Walker Harris has 5% damage to health. And yeah, so if you are wanting to optimally build Ravenous for open world, that is what I suggest you do. Don't ignore the whole armor thing that people keep telling you to do, because it's wrong. It's flat out, undeniably wrong, which is comical. And since we've just spoken about crazy speedrun strats, there is one more thing that I need to go over. And I actually learnt this recently by talking to a few members of LFN. If you don't know who LFN are, they are probably the highest rated clan with the best members in the world. they are also the people that work out these weird and crazy speedrun strats, so I would say their knowledge is probably to be respected. So when stacking Ravenous, you can only initially put up to 10 stacks on a target, but while you have that bonus damage to armor plating along with the bonus armor, within that 5 seconds, if you are able to get another 10 stacks, you essentially get that again. Although it doesn't actually seem to give you an increase in the bonus armor, the effect of the damage to armor plating is essentially then quadrupled if you can stack it twice, but you have 5 seconds to do it in, because each individual buff will only last 5 seconds for it. So you do your 5 from the left, 1 from the right. This will give you your effectively 200% amplified damage to armor plating. You then have 5 seconds to do 6 from the left, because you did that 1 on the right earlier, so 1 will act as a primer, as a detonator rather than a primer, sorry. So you got to then do 6 and then 1, and then that will give you, in essence, 400% amplified damage to armor plating, which is how they do very, very silly damage in one-shot raid bosses. Well, there's more to it than that, using negotiators to transfer the critical hit damage, as well as Dodge City Holster for buffing the pistol, because you might notice they swapped to a pistol to take the shot. That gives like another 100% damage, as well as headshot damage. It's comical, it's laughable, it's funny. But to date, that is all of the correct information people need to know about Ravenous. Okay, it doesn't work with armor, it's armor plating, which is health damage. The explosions are not affected by anything other than weapon damage, your rifle damage, and then your crit chance, or if you have the amplified damage bonus on as well, it will also be affected by your health damage. Okay, stop believing poor information on YouTube. Anyway, that just about does it for me. Have fun, good luck, don't die. I really do hope this helps people out with Ravenous and how it actually works. Anyway, in the meantime, just have fun. Stay alive, agents. Stay alive.